everyone, this is Lisa from the Problem Consulting Agency. There was a big announcement today. We all know that they're going to stop taking people in for the flagpoling where you need to go. Normally the visitor visa holder go to the border crossing and then get their temporary permit approved. So basically today's announcement is about they're no longer accommodating those flag polling services at the border. So now we need to wonder what will be next. And then what it really is, the flag polling. Does it mean that I need to get out of the Canada immediately right now, and how can I come back? So there are lots of uncertainty around this new announcement. However, I can just give you the simple example and also the instance. What is the difference between flag polling, getting the temporary permit at the port of entry? So those are two separate things. So first thing first, let's just talk about no more flag polling. So what is flag polling? So this is a reference from the actual IRCC site that it says. So flag polling is basically when temporary residents of Canada leave the country and they immediately re-enter within 24 hours to receive the same-day immigration service at the border according to the CBSA. And then they were saying here in this section right here, implement changes to end flag polling, which happens when temporary residents leave Canada, immediately return to a port of entry. So the point is it's immediate and then the 24 hours to a port of entry to get immigration services. This practice uses significant resources at the border, distracts border officers from enforcement activities and slow cross-border traffic. So what it means is now, as soon as they implement this, they will stop taking you in to cross the border. If you were to say, hi, I'm here to flag polling, hi, I'm just here to get my work permit, that will no longer be okay. So, but this is just one of the scenarios that I had in mind. If I go on a holiday, so I'm staying here in Canada as a student. So I decided to go on a holiday to Mexico, for example. And then when I cross, let's just say I cross the border crossing in between Canada and US today. And then when I cross the US border, they'll be asking me, what's the purpose of your visit to America? I will no longer be able to say I'm here to flagpole. Instead, I actually do need a purpose to go through the border. So I'll be saying, hey, I'm actually passing transit US because I have a vacation plan to go to Mexico. So I just decided to drive, and like things like that that's what it means. So that would no longer be considered as a flag polling, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. But then you need to know what's the difference between actual flag polling and then the issuance of a temporary permit at the port of entry. So when you search for when you arrive at the port of entry, so this is actually what you can see if you type in like, how can I get my work permit at the port of entry? So this is not the flag polling. This is actually, we call the port of entry issuance of the temporary permit. So whenever you go through the border, when you're entering to Canada directly from, from wherever you're flying from, then if you are eligible to apply for this port of entry visa. So I wouldn't say it's not port of entry visa, but you can, like, if you're eligible, you're still allowed to get your temporary permit at the port of entry. You're just not allowed to do the flag polling anymore. Okay. So how is it different? So and then what does it mean by the letter of introductory? So port of entry letter, what is that? So you probably get a little bit confused in like multiple different levels. So some people do need the letter of introductory. I normally call it simply pre-approval letter. And then you can only get that pre-approval letter through the online application. So your application already gone through the IRCC. IRCC did check up on all the documents and checklist from your file, and then they pre-approved your permit. And the last stage is left with CBSA officer, because that's what they do for a living. Like, they, even if IRCC does their job and then they think that it's okay for you to come to Canada, it is still at the end of the day CBSA officer's discretion to decide whether or not you should be allowed into Canada. Okay, so this POE letter is what we called lots of different names: correspondence letter, introductory letter, introduction letter, but most of the time this looks like this. Your application to study or your application to work in Canada has been initially approved by the IRCC. So initially approved. However, you still need to bring this in to enter to Canada, because the final decision to issue a study permit and allows you to enter Canada is made after the examination by an officer in Canada, okay? So you can either get your online application approved and then get your introductory letter and then take it to the point of entry and then they get examined by CBSA officer, and then they will be the one who finalize your approval of your permit. So this side, it's what we call the pre-approval point of entry letter, whereas this issuance of a temporary permit at the port of entry means you don't have your online application. You only have a certain letter. For example, this is actually talking about the LMIA. So if you have an LMIA positive letter, you can actually take it to the border and then you can get your work permit immediately, because as long as you meet the eligibility requirement. If ETA visa holders, ETA holders are eligible to apply for their work permit at the port of entry without POE introductory letter, which I have already explained down below. And then there's another thing: if you are in Canada already with valid permit, except for the visitor permit. For example, if you're here as a study permit holder, if you're already here as an open work permit holder, if you're here with the work permit, close to work permit, whatever those temporary permit is valid, and then if you apply for the extension of your permit, this is the approval letter that you will see. Your application to stay in Canada as a temporary residence has been approved. So in this case, extension case, you will get your work permit mailed to you. So at the end of the day, my final thoughts and insight about this information is that flagpoling is no longer available. So it's either you actually have a valid point of leaving or entering the US and then coming back after 24 hours, that's reasonable. Immigration CBSA officer is still under a responsibility to issue you a temporary permit as long as you meet this eligibility requirements at the port of entry. However, if you are here without valid permit and then you have no other option but to apply for your letter of introductory online, and then you have to wait till you get your online approval letter, and then you need to do it, you need to take that letter of introductory letter to the border. Again, flagpoling is not accepted at this point. So you'll be taking it to the border, not with the way of a flagpoling, leaving the country and coming back after 24 hours. Decent, like definitely has to have a valid reason. And then you can get your temporary permit converted. And then lastly, what they're saying is, and also from the news CIC, everywhere you can find, they are planning on creating some sort of office area for CBSA officers to be focusing on this flagpoling situation. So instead of sending someone to US border, because the US border does not want to increase their workload anymore. So instead of doing that, in my opinion, I think it is okay, or it is kind of reasonable to say that they will be building another office area where you don't need to go across the border to the US, but there will be a side office next to the Canadian side of the border, where you would go and get to do your flagpoling situation, but it's no longer called the flagpoling because you wouldn't need to cross the border. Or I think that there might be possibility they will be using their actual local IRCC office in Canada, and then maybe have you made an appointment for those change of status and things like that. That's also a possibility. But like, it's just my thoughts, and it's just there are so many uncertainty that like I do not want you to take my opinion as a fact, like actual factual statement. Like, please do not do that, and that's the last thing I want. So in my opinion, this is a good way of like how the Canadian immigration system works right now. And then like they should really, they had already implemented a few changes about the flagpoling quite a bit, as a matter of fact. So this was expected in a way that in IRCC field, and then my line of work. So that's one thing. And then there's another big one just popped in. It's also, I have already talked about this earlier, but there will be no more extra points for the LMIA permit holder, so LMIA positive holder. So there will be no more 50% up in the express entry system. So we don't know whether or not they're going to take existing persons' express entry points out, but I'm sure that's what they're planning to do. Otherwise, it just makes no sense. So if you had 50% added on your express entry already, I think there might be a possibility that they are going to implement these rules to even the older existing candidates in the pool of express entry. So I do see that there will be still lots more changes come through for the next quarter and the end of this year. So tune in, but this is not the end of the world. If you want to know what's my thoughts on like how we can overcome this situation, you get to see those two previous videos that I've been explaining about this situation, and then this has already been explained in my earlier videos. So like, please do not feel too concerned about it. We just have to work with what we got. And again, I definitely do see that this is a good change, but like very positive change for any future Canadian immigrants. And like this will be helpful at one point, but you just need to make your plan correctly. And if you need help, if you need my consultation, please feel free to visit No Problem Consulting, and I would love to help you to get through the situation. Thank you. Bye.